The religious can't understand very simple concepts, can they? Or maybe they do, but it's problematic for their faith, so they just play dumb. Or maybe they really are dumb, I don't know. Let's look at a video today of someone who seems to understand until it gets to his religion and then his brains just dribble out of his ears. Won't that be fun? So, this comes from the Paul Red Eye channel, and I know I horribly butchered that name, so sorry about that. But this is someone who is very confused about how language and reality actually works, which I suppose is hardly a surprise, is it? He argues that atheism can't be a lack of belief, and in fact he wants to say that he lacks a belief that God doesn't exist, showing that he has no clue what atheism is either. There's a whole lot of confusion going on here, so I guess it's best we just tackle it, not that I think that the religious are actually going to care. So get a drink and strap in, because I'm sure this is going to be a bumpy ride.
What's up, everybody? Coming at you today with a video on a very nuanced subject matter. I'm guessing 99% of you won't even have any idea kind of what I'm talking about.
I'm sure you're not going to have any idea what the hell you're talking about either, although that's just a guess since I obviously haven't seen the video yet. Just reading the title of his video shows that he's terminally confused, so we're going to spend a lot of time today, I'm guessing, just correcting his misconceptions. Not that I think that he's going to care. It's very rare that we address theists who actually do. They are not interested in learning anything because they are already convinced that they know everything. I go into every theist video looking for new and testable information, and they just don't have any. It's just blind faith stated confidently, but their confidence means absolutely nothing if their claims are not actually true. And it's the factually true part that actually matters. So we're going to give him a chance to demonstrate something, but I wouldn't be getting my hopes up if I were you. We're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos into this, and not one of them has ever had an intelligent thing to say. So let's get back to Paul. Please show us what you've got.
But if you are the type of person that's interested in discourse and conversations around spirituality, God, that kind of thing, then this subject matter could be for you. It's been something that's been on my mind lately.
Well, I am interested in those subjects, but only to see if they are actually true. The actual truth matters. And this is the problem with most theists, and I only say most because I haven't talked to all of them yet, but I have yet to see a single one who actually cared if their beliefs were verifiably true, who were willing to put them to the actual test and see if they stood up to the evidence that we have. Nope, it's all faith and fifis, and that is nothing to be concerned with at all. The second that faith comes up, I know I'm talking to an idiot, because faith is not a demonstrable path to truth. It's just an overactive fantasy life, barely in disguise. So I know I broke in on him and he had something on his mind, so let's get back to Paul and see what he wants to tell us.
And I just wanted to share my thoughts. Maybe some of you may be interested in what I'm about to say. But, you know, before in the past, I was a little bit confused because I would watch a lot of content between atheists and theists. If you don't know what those words are, an atheist, well, what do you think that word means?
I'll tell you exactly what that word means. Heck, I'll tell you what both of them mean because I'm helpful. A theist is someone who actively believes in at least one God, not necessarily in any religion, and keeping in mind that there are non-theistic religions that have no God, such as Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Jainism, and some forms of Hinduism, which focuses more on following your own dharma than in serving and following and worshiping deities. Satanism, at least most forms of it, are non-theistic. They're actually atheists. And, of course, atheism is the complete lack of that. So it's not believing that any gods exist. It is not the positive statement that no gods are real, although some people who believe that certainly do fit under the category of atheist, since they do also lack a belief in gods. But I'm sure this guy is going to entirely ignore the reality of it and pretend that all atheists are making a positive claim that no gods are real, which is simply not true. Of course, the reason the religious pull this is because they think it benefits their side. It becomes, well, they're making a positive claim, so get off our backs and stop demanding we prove what we profess is true. It's a dodge, nothing more. We are not, in general terms, making any positive claims about the existence of gods. We have looked, by and large, at the claims you've made and the evidence you've presented, and we have not been convinced that any of it is true. Thus, we don't believe you. We're not saying you're wrong necessarily. We have not been convinced that you are right. And that is your job. You're the one making the positive claim, not us. You're the one who has to back it up. Because we have no positive claims here. You do. So, I guess, get to shucking and jiving, because that's really all you can do.
Traditionally, atheists means somebody who doesn't believe in God. They say God does not exist.
That's not what it says. Notice how he's quick to skip over that. Atheism is someone who doesn't believe in any gods. Read your own damn definition. Instead, he just makes something up about how atheists believe gods don't exist. Seriously, how blatantly dishonest can you be? Why can't he just read the definition as written? Because it doesn't get him where he wants to go. And that's why I figure his video has been downvoted into oblivion. Currently, at least as I'm writing this, at 43 upvotes and 377 downvotes. You'd think that the religious would figure this out, wouldn't you? But they don't care. After all, this is just about YouTube engagement, and downvotes count just as much as upvotes. Negative comments count just as much as positive. So they're just looking to stroke the algorithm, and I think that's childish. So he starts off his video just lying. Why are we not surprised at that? I wonder.
An atheist believes in God or says that God or gods exist.
That was fine. It was in keeping with the definition that he actually put up on screen. So why couldn't he do that for atheism? Because he's not after the truth. The religious get mad every single time I point this out, that they don't care about reality. But there are examples after examples after examples of this clearly being true, and the religious refuse to acknowledge them. Atheists will tell you very clearly what we mean when we say atheists. Dictionaries will say it too. In fact, a lot of dictionaries will say someone who doesn't believe in a god or gods, or someone who believes gods don't exist, because both of those things are actually true as far as they go. But he can't do that. He couldn't even come up with one of those. Instead, he got one that only did the first part, and then he just made up the second part on his own. He can't read because he doesn't want this to be true. These people are morons, and in fact, obviously, out-and-out liars. Do we think these people really care about reality in any demonstrable way if this is how they behave? Because if you do, I'd love to hear from you in the comments, because holy crap, this was ridiculously blatant.
Now, the word atheist, the definition of that has changed.
No, it hasn't. As stated in the definition that you put on screen, you made that decision yourself. That is still completely accurate. It refers to people who do not believe, not who positively state that gods don't exist, although that still falls under the umbrella of atheism, but it is a lack of belief, not the made up crap that you tried to claim it was. It has not changed at all, ever. This is a theist lie. This guy is just leaning into it. He either knows it's a lie, and he should, because he looked up the definition and then purposefully changed it, or he's just ignorant, which I suppose is also possible, but that's not something to be proud of either. The only people who get to define what atheism is are the atheists who are referring to themselves, because language is descriptive, not prescriptive. It describes how it's actually used by the people that it applies to. I couldn't just redefine Christianity on a whim, and he doesn't get to do it with atheism, so fuck him if he says what I figure he's about to. So let's go see if I'm right.
And that's one of the main things I want to cover today. Now, what I see get brought up a lot in these discussions is this burden of proof. So I was kind of like, why do they keep talking about the burden of proof and just kind of shifting it back?
We're not, and in this case, the only reason the burden of proof ever comes up is because the religious can never meet it. They are the ones making all the claims, not us. They are saying that their gods exist, not us. That has a burden of proof. If you say it, you have to prove it. And in fact, this is why they're trying to redefine atheism, because they're tired of being in the hot seat all the time. They can't prove that their claims are true, so they're trying to push it off on others by claiming that we're making claims. We're just not. That makes them unhappy, so they're just lying about it. And that might have worked when religion had unearned social power, but that's mostly gone today. They can't force others to do what they want them to do most of the time, so they just whine about it. They just want this stuff to be true, so it takes the pressure off them, but that doesn't make any of it true, does it? Now, I might not have said if he wasn't so ridiculously blatant about it. I might not have even done this video, but he made such a complete fool of himself up front that I think people deserve to see the fundamental dishonesty of a lot of religious people. Not all by any means, but we see this kind of thing coming from big name apologists all the time, right? This is what religion is. This is what religion does to people. It's nothing that anyone ought to be proud of. This is just pathetic.
Make that same assumption that you do, then you shift the burden of proof to turn my lack of belief into a positive belief by accusing me of physicalism.
And Aaron Raw is right. It's a shifting of the burden of proof. It's a logical fallacy. Of course, the religious don't care about that because they're only after emotional comfort. They just really want to believe. Wanting to believe, that isn't enough though, is it? You actually have to be right, but the religious don't care about that, do they? If they did, they'd have actual evidence to back up their claims, which they don't. And they wouldn't be engaged in laughable, ludicrous logical fallacies all the time, which they demonstrably are. They're not after fact. They're after faith. They're after feelings. They just really want to believe the stuff that comforts them emotionally, and whether or not any of it is true, that's entirely irrelevant for them. So we get theist after theist after theist after theist, apologist after apologist after apologist, making these demonstrably false claims because they think it gets them where they want to go. But they don't care about getting to the actual truth. Where they want to go isn't fact. It's not reality. It's the childish fantasy land that they've got in their heads. And how stupid is that?
And it's more clear to me now. So essentially, whoever makes the claim bears the burden of proof.
Exactly. The religious are the ones making the claims, so they have to be able to back them up. Atheists are not making claims, therefore we have no burden of proof. And I hear from the religious whining all the time, but that's not fair. So what? Life's not fair. Get over it. There is one and only one standard. Follow it. If you don't want to defend yourself, then stop making claims that you have to back up. It's that simple. Of course, the religious don't like that one either. They want to believe things for which they can offer no evidentiary support, and they know it. They want to spread the good news, but they have nothing to back it up with. And that's their problem. They need to be able to back this stuff up, and they can't. And that's why they're so busy hoofing it around with the goalposts, because they really want to believe, but they've got no demonstrably good reason to do so. Because this isn't about reason, it's about emotions. And that's not anything to be proud of, but for some bizarre reason they are.
What does burden of proof mean? It means that you're obligated to give evidence on your claim.
Or at the very least, be able to if somebody asks. If nobody asks, then you don't really have to, although you should have that evidence in hand just in case. That's really why the religious do what they do. They have no evidence to offer, no compelling evidence at least, which is why they don't really want to talk to us. They stay in their religious echo chambers where they know that nobody's going to ask for the evidence because everyone believes for entirely emotional reasons, so they just hide there because it's easier. But that doesn't remove your burden of proof. It just means that you're dealing with gullible idiots like yourself who don't care if it's actually true. And that's really the point here. You ought to only believe things that are actually true, to the best of your ability to determine. You should care if you have evidence. They don't, but they should. The religious, though, we know they don't care, do they? And it's really sad that they don't, because there's something fundamentally wrong with these people. These people have a couple dozen screws loose, and that's pathetic.
So for example, if I say, hey, it's raining outside, let's just say for some reason we can't confirm and look outside and know for sure if it's raining. But let's say I make a claim, it's raining outside. The burden of proof is on me, so I have to provide evidence on why I think it's raining outside.
Yep, but if you offer your argument or your support or whatever to somebody else, and that other person says they don't believe you, in other words, they haven't been convinced, then they don't have to prove you wrong. You have not convinced them with your claim. They have not made a counterclaim that you're wrong. They are just not convinced that you're right. There are always three options. Yes, you agree with the claim. No, you disagree with the claim, and I don't believe you. You have not been convinced that the claim is factually correct. The first two have a burden of proof, or at least potentially so. The last does not. And that is all atheists are doing by and large, since obviously I can't speak for anyone but myself. We just don't believe you. Your argument has not been persuasive. It looks like he understands this, at least in general. Where do you think it's all going to go wrong? I don't know. Why don't you let me know down in the comments? Because it's obvious it's going to go wrong, but there's a lot of ways this could actually go.
If somebody else says it is not raining outside, they made the claim, the burden of proof is now on them.
It's actually on both of you. Anyone who makes the claim has the burden of proof. You can't just pass it around like a hot potato. You have the burden of proof, and if someone else makes another claim, they now have their own burden of proof. That doesn't stop you from having to back up your own claim just because they now have to back up theirs. This is how discussions happen, with opposing sides presenting their evidence to determine which side, if either one, is best supported. This really shouldn't be that hard, should it? I don't know why for the religious it is.
Are you following me? I know, like I say, it's pretty nuanced.
It's not at all. This is ludicrously simple. Make a claim, back it up. That's it. Why do I think he's going to take a hard left at Albuquerque, though? I see this from tons of theists who will now try to claim that atheists are making a claim, even though we're not, or that theists don't have to back up their claims because faith or fee-fees, hell, who knows? It's a very simple concept, though. Make a claim, back it up. Zero exceptions. So get to it, Paul. We're all waiting on you.
But what I see over and over in these discussions lately between atheists and theists is the atheist will say, I'm not making a claim.
Because we're not. We are saying that you have not convinced us that what you are saying is true. That is not a claim. That is the state of my conviction, having listened to your argument. I am reporting on how I feel about what you have said. That's it. Now, you don't have to care if I'm convinced. You can pick up your marbles and go home. You're welcome to do that, but you still have not convinced us of anything. We are welcome to tell others that your argument is unconvincing. Then they can make up their own mind. Of course, they don't have to. They can side with you, whatever. Individuals are individuals. But our not being convinced is not the same as us making a claim. You were doing so well there for a moment, but now it's all falling apart. So let's just go back to Paul and watch it all go down the drain.
I'm not saying that God doesn't exist. I'm simply saying that I lack a belief in God.
Atheism is simply saying God is not guilty of existing. It's not the same thing as saying God does not exist.
And that's the new definition now of atheist, is a lack of a belief in God.
It's always been the definition. It was the definition that you presented earlier. You know, the one you lied about. Because you don't get to tell us what we mean by the words that we apply to ourselves. That is not how reality works. Of course, the religious are desperate to get around their own evidentiary requirements because they know, I think on some level, that they have nothing. Again, it's why they don't want to talk to us, because they understand or have experience or whatever. They know that what they've got doesn't convince others who aren't starting off with faith and fifis. And now they're trying desperately to spin it in a way to the people on their side so that it doesn't look so bad that they fail all the time. And it's not working. It just isn't.
Now, why is this important? It's important because it's much easier to shoot down a claim than it is to make claims for yourself.
It's not fair. Sorry, the standard is the standard. It's being applied evenly to all. If you don't like it, stop making claims. If you never tell me that there's a God, if you never try to share your faith, if you just keep it all to yourself, then nobody is going to ask you to back it up. Nobody is going to ask for proof. It's that simple. So please do that. Leave people alone. Stop harassing people with your unsupported bullshit. It'll solve all your problems. You don't want to do that though, do you? So you're just shooting yourself in the foot and earning what you get.
Or maybe I should say provide evidence for claims.
When claims are made, evidence is warranted. If no claims are made, it doesn't apply. This is never going to change. But the religious get tired of being in the hot seat all the time. I mean, they put themselves there on their own after all. So they're now trying to squirm their way out of it because I'm sure they're getting really tired of being laughed at. And that's their fault too. They voluntarily put themselves into a position where they bear the burden of proof, and sadly, they just can't meet it. Nobody did that to you. You did that to yourselves. Knock it off. It's not that hard. However, they can't because their silly religion forces them to do it, and thus they're looking for any way, including being blatantly dishonest, to get out of it, or at least to push it off on others. And no, we're not going to let them do that. So put up or shut up. It's that simple.
Now, to go to the example that I gave, it's raining outside. Let's say I say it's raining outside, so now the burden of proof is on me, so I have to provide some kind of evidence. So let's just say I say, well, you know what? When I see people walk in the door, I see that their shoulders are wet, their top of their head is wet. I can infer that it's probably raining.
Or that there's a sprinkler running outside. Or that somebody on the roof is just pissing on passersby. Now, you can say that it's probably raining or possibly raining, so long as you acknowledge that there are other options and probably nobody's going to call you on it. However, that's not what theists are doing, is it? They aren't saying probably there's a God or maybe there's a God. They're saying that there definitely is a God, and more than that, it's always their God. And that incurs a significant burden of proof, and they damn well better be able to back it up. The religious simply can't, because their beliefs are not based on evidence that they can present to others. It's based on childhood indoctrination and an overactive imagination and blind faith. Those are not things that you can present to others and demonstrate that they represent factual reality. Therefore, we don't have to believe you. You have not convinced us that the things that you are saying are demonstrably true. You don't have to care about that. You can just go bugger off and stop making these unsupported and ultimately unsupportable claims, and people will stop asking you to justify them. But apparently these people can't do that, can they? Part of their beliefs requires that they try to convince everyone around them, and they don't have anything of substance to convince them with. And that's why they fail all the time. They're just doing this to themselves. Why is that not surprising? Anyway, next week we're going to pick up right here, so watch out for that. I've got no clue why the religious can't figure out what they're doing wrong, mostly because I'm pretty sure they don't care. These are very simple concepts, but they just can't get it through their heads. Maybe we'll find out why in the last half of the video, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, so let's do that. The religious have problems. We've known that for a very long time. They just want to believe what they want to believe, and they make up excuses for why the world doesn't look the way that we'd expect it to if any of their beliefs were actually true. They can do nothing but make excuses. They can offer no evidence. They can offer no proof. They can only make excuses. And today, that's all we're going to hear. So strap in, because this one's going to be rough. We're back to finish out the Paul Rezai video, and I know I just butchered that name again. My apologies to Paul, but I don't think this time is going to be any more rational than the last. It's shocking just how little these people actually understand, but they're perfectly happy and willing to make a complete fool of themselves in public because, say it with me, they just want to believe. But that doesn't make any of it true, and that's what it's all about. That's what it should be about anyway. Truth. Actual truth. Not faith and fifis, not wishes and dreams, not it makes me feel good. Truth. But they don't care about that, do they? Or they wouldn't act the way that they do. So let's get back to it.
I hear what seems like rain on the roof. That leads me to believe that it's raining.
So we're just picking this up exactly where we left off, which in this case happens to be in the middle of a thought, but sometimes that's just the way it goes. So let me look at this a different way. Is it a reasonable inference that because you hear something that you understand signifies rain, that it is probably raining? Sure. That's using evidence to come to a rational conclusion. That doesn't mean it's definitely raining, as I said last time, because there are other possibilities. But if you take the evidence that you have at hand and come to provisional conclusions based on that evidence, logically derived from the things that you've observed, there's really nothing wrong with that. That doesn't guarantee that you're right. It only says that, well, at least you've thought about it, and hey, this sounds pretty good based on that evidence. Now show that you've done that with any God. Because if you can't demonstrate your process, then why would you expect us to believe your conclusion? It's why when theists get mad that we don't accept their beliefs, all I do is point out that I am being consistent. No evidence will always mean no belief. It shouldn't mean anything else. So here's my question to the religious. What the hell is wrong with you?
From time to time, I hear thunder. Where there's thunder, there's clouds. Where there's clouds, there's probably rain. Those three things leads me to the conclusion that it's raining. Okay?
You're still making my point. Where you have evidence, you can make rational conclusions. Where evidence is lacking, you can't. It's why I keep asking the religious to walk me through the steps that they took to get to their gods, and they aren't even trying. They have no steps. It's just, I don't get it, therefore God. But why God? Because I like it. And when we point out what they're doing, how stupid this thing that they're doing is, they get mad at us, but they don't change their methodology, do they? They don't change their conclusions. They don't look for additional evidence. They just really want to believe.
Now, the thing is, giving evidence for your position is a little bit more tricky. Now, if you have the position of just hearing somebody's evidence, you could always just come up with alternate explanations to disregard what they say. So somebody could say, well, the water on the shoulder and on the head is probably there's sprinklers outside.
Which I did last week, so he understands where he's going wrong. Because there's a big difference between saying it could be raining and it is raining. One is a positive claim, one is a possibility based on the evidence that you have. There is a difference between the two. Saying that there could be a God is not the same as saying there is a God. Positive claims require corroboratory support. It's why we don't believe them, because they are not offering anything that points directly to their gods. Without it, their claims are completely meaningless. Just because you interpret things as your God doesn't mean that your interpretation means anything. It doesn't matter what you really want to be true. If you want me to believe in your God, then you have to convince me with the evidence that you present that your God is the most rational, best supported conclusion that one can possibly come to. And I'm sorry, but you're not even close to doing that. If you want me to believe in your God, then you have to do a whole lot better than, well, it seems to me, assuming that everyone else is just looking for your imaginary friend like you are. Because we're not. We're better than that. And you have to be too. If you want there to be a God, and I don't care what you want here really, there either is one or there isn't, but if you want to convince other people that there is a God, you damn well better be able to present your evidence. And they can't.
And what you think you hear is rain, it's probably just birds walking around on the roof. And that sound that you think is thunder, that's just electrical transformers just blowing up from time to time around your house.
That's just you being desperate to make the other side look silly. Nobody would ever say that. However, you're the one not willing to consider other possibilities, because there are other possibilities. You know how to determine what's actually going on? You go and you look. In the case of rain, that's pretty simple. In the case of a God, that's much harder, but you still have to make reasonable assumptions. It's magic is not reasonable. There needs to be a whole lot more evidence than you've got to accept that. You need to be able to put your faith and your fifis aside and care about actual reality. And as we all know, the religious aren't even trying because they don't remotely care. And that's a problem, isn't it? At least I certainly think so. How about you?
So, of course, I don't think it's good to do that. I don't think that that's good practice if we're really trying to get to truth. But it's easy just to throw out alternate explanations, like I said, of what's possible.
Which you should do, and then take the steps necessary to figure out the actual truth. And where you can't find out actual truth, you should make sure that your conclusions, which, let's be honest, the religious aren't making conclusions, they're just making faith statements, but you should make sure that those are just provisional while you look for better evidence for support. What you want to be true doesn't matter. What is actually true does. It seems to me is useless. But if you notice, the religious start and end right there. They're only after emotional comfort, not actual truth. But I really like the idea means nothing. You have to be rational in evaluating candidate explanations, and I'm sorry, but God done it is not a rationally defensible candidate explanation for anything. It has no evidence in support of it. You can't show that your God is real. You aren't even trying to do so, and it's the lack of effort that really shows where the religious are going wrong. How do you know that? I just do. That's effectively every conversation with the religious, right? But how do you know? Where's your evidential support that points directly to your God? Well, they don't have that, do they? I think they know that they don't have anything of substance, but they really want to believe they do, so they just play make-believe. I don't think they care enough, even though it's essential. But then again, look who we're talking about. These people really aren't that bright.
But it's not about what's possible. It's about what's more plausible. It's about what's more reasonable.
And a magical man in the sky that cares about your sex life isn't a reasonable explanation without supporting evidence. That's the point. This is why "it sounds good to me" is so meaningless. It's why faith gets you absolutely nowhere. This is why you have to be able to convince us that you're being reasonable or rational and that you have evidence to back up your claims. And as I keep saying, they're not even trying to do any of that. They aren't coming to the table with evidence for their gods. They don't want to talk to us at all because they know they've got nothing. They have to at this point. They can't be that dumb. I refuse to believe that these people, after all the years and years and years and all the discussions that they've had, don't know how empty their arguments are. They just have an emotional desire for it to be true, but it is neither reasonable nor rational to do so. It's all faith and fifis, and that is just stupid.
Now, again, to go back to discourse, atheists will say right out the gate, I'm not making a claim, I just lack a belief in God. So the burden of proof is on you.
Which is true. You are the one making the claim that a God exists. We ask you to back it up in some demonstrable way. You fail to do so, thus, we don't believe you. It's that simple. We aren't the ones running around with a mandate to convert the world, are we? That's you people. I don't know about you, but I never bring up atheism to anyone out of the blue. It's only in response to their religious claims, and I bring it up only as a means to demand that they back up their empty claims. They just can't do it. The failure is always theirs. You make the claim, you back it up. I'm making no claim. I'm just waiting for you to support yours. If you cannot do so to my satisfaction, then I'm going to continue not believing you. It's that easy.
So they shove all the burden of proof onto the theist, right?
No, you do that to yourself by making the claims in the first place. If you just shut up, nobody would care. I virtually never have a conversation about the existence of aliens running the government because nobody stops me in the line at the grocery store to share the good news of alienism. If you would just keep those crazy beliefs to yourself, then nobody would ever ask you to defend them. You're the one doing this to yourself. Are you mental? Yeah, I think we already know the answer to that, don't we?
So then the theist goes over all of their evidence after evidence after evidence, and then they say, no, and they just come up with alternate explanations, like I said over here, which is very easy to do. Anybody can do that.
Except that's not how it goes down in reality, is it? That's you saying all the stuff that you believe on faith, and we point out that it doesn't actually mean anything, or in many cases doesn't even exist, and you get mad because we're not taking your blind faith seriously. That's because blind faith means nothing at all. We are not swayed by blah-de-de-blah, therefore God. You have to prove God, not just assert God, and you can't see why that's a problem. And that's why I'll sometimes throw in blah-de-de-blah, therefore invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. Just turn it back on them. Say the same thing back that they're saying to you, word for word, just a different conclusion, and they aren't introspective enough to understand the problem. But you're just making fun of me. No, you're making fun of yourself. I'm just showing you where you're going wrong, and you're too blinded by your emotions to see it. You can't accept that you're screwing up. And that's why these conversations go nowhere, because you can't just proclaim, therefore God, without showing that a God is actually responsible. There's a whole lot of steps in there that you're missing, and you're too blind to understand the issues. The fault is yours, not ours. Maybe you ought to do something about that. Just saying.
So if you are an atheist, right, and you truly just don't know, right? You're not sure, you lack a belief in God.
Tell me he's not going to play the agnostic card. Please, he can't be that dumb. I mean, I know that there are a lot of people out there who are, but come on, please, be better than this, okay? It's not that hard, because saying you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic doesn't change anything. I still don't believe in your silly imaginary friend for the exact same reasons. I still haven't been convinced that it's a coherent concept. You have not done your job in convincing me that you have the slightest clue. It doesn't matter what label you slap on it, you have still failed. Maybe agnostic is a less threatening label for the religious, I don't know, but you still haven't met your burden of proof under the Great Commission. I still don't believe. So please stop being stupid. Let's see if that's actually where he's going. I've got no idea if it is, but honestly, would we be surprised? I don't think so.
If that's your position, just consider saying that you're agnostic, or just say you don't know.
See? I called it. But what difference does it make? Let's be honest. I still don't believe in your imaginary God. This is all about them going for emotional comfort. Well, if they don't call themselves atheists, I just won't feel so bad. Yeah, fuck you. Because not only do they not understand what any of those words mean, I mean, these are some of the most ignorant people around, but they don't get to tell anybody else what words they get to use to apply to themselves, and the fact that they're even going to try to do this just makes them massive assholes. Go fuck yourself, Paul, you and your stupid smug face. You have spent an entire video, so far at least, making yourself look stupid, and your upvote to downvote ratio proves it. You are getting trashed, and at least to his credit, he's sort of answering his detractors. Badly, I mean, but he's at least putting in some sort of effort. Because all he's doing is just doubling down on all the things that people are showing are laughable bullshit. That's not exactly a surprise, is it? So, with all that aside, let's just move on.
But don't come in with this stance that God doesn't exist and then use words to kind of shift around so that way you can just throw the burden of proof onto somebody else.
But that's not what we're doing. We are not saying that gods do not exist. That's you insisting that we're doing that, but we absolutely are not. What he's doing is saying, but this is what they really mean. Like he has a fucking clue. This is really, really common though, isn't it? These people are idiots. But everyone is really just like me, so I get to tell you what you're really like, and you just have to accept it. No, I don't. This guy is getting called out, and for good reason. Because he's an asshole. Now, we see this a lot around here, don't we? Theists who think they get to define what everyone else says because, of course, they can't be wrong. Whereas I will make a lot of predictions about what I think the religious are going to do, and I just wait for them to hang themselves. I'm not telling the religious what they believe. I've seen it for untold years now, and I'm just showing where they're going to go wrong, and invariably, they usually do. They are proving what a bunch of predictable idiots they are. Maybe they ought to knock that off.
And if you're a theist and you like having these conversations, or you found yourself in a conversation with somebody and they do something like that, something that you can do that I feel like kind of sheds some light on the situation is you can just kind of flip the script.
First off, I don't think you're going to actually find an atheist doing any of that. I don't know for sure, of course, since I only get to speak for myself, but I don't think I've ever seen it, or at least I don't remember seeing it in a conversation, and if I had, I would be the first one to call it out. You know me, I don't put up with anybody's bullshit. Secondly, though, I will agree with flipping the script so long as it's done honestly, so long as it's done to make a point. So here's one of the easiest predictions ever. I'm not even going to call it a prediction since it's in his video title, so that's unfair for me to do. So this isn't exactly going to be surprising or anything, but just saying, I lack a belief that God doesn't exist is really stupid, but we'll go into the details in a second when he actually gets there. This is not going to go well for the religious, and I'm wondering if you can see it as clearly as I can. If you think so, pause now and let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to know if this is as obvious to other people as I think it is to me.
You can say, I'm a theist.
Which, by definition, is someone who believes in a God. Go to the dictionary. It means a person who believes in the existence of a god or gods, specifically of a creator who intervenes in the universe. You'd have to pick an entirely new term to refer to yourself, because you're already proving just how disingenuous you are. And before anyone says anything, an atheist, from the exact same dictionary, Oxford in this case, an atheist is a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. That "or" is important. Remember, he had to lie about it in the last video. He couldn't even come up with a definition that gave the option to put it on screen. So far, he's showing just how irrational he is, because a person who lacks belief in the non-existence of a god cannot be a theist, which is someone who has an active belief that a god or gods are real. It just doesn't work that way. Stop being a moron.
And they'll say, oh, so you believe in God. What evidence do you have? And you say, no. It's not that I believe in God. I just lack a belief that there is no God.
And when the atheist gets done laughing, they're just going to shrug and walk away. Big deal. All you've done is cost yourself a conversation. A person who lacks a belief that there is no God has no means whatsoever to convince anyone else that your God is real. So why are you even bringing this up? It's not like atheists have a great commission to go out and deconvert the world. If anyone said that to me, I'd say, cool, bro, bye. I don't start a conversation with the religious. I only address what they are saying, and if that's honestly their position, which, let's be honest, it isn't, then they have no reason to start any conversations either. In fact, they have no reason for being religious. You can't be a Christian, for instance, without an active belief in the Christian God. An active belief is not a lack of belief. It can't be. So you've just done away with your reason to engage in any conversation on religion, and especially to engage in any conversions with anyone. Leave everybody alone. Just do that. You have to admit that you're either lying, which they would be in this case, or that they're being irrational, which they are, or both. It also means that they could never be more than a generic theist. Without an active belief, there goes all organized religions. So why would you want to talk to anybody at all in that case? What is it that you're trying to convert someone to? This is just painfully stupid. Tell me you don't see it too.
You see? And of course, this is just all This is just trying to shed some light on some things. I'm not saying to really use that because I don't think it's good just to keep shifting the burden of proof.
Because it doesn't get you anywhere, and it's all a gigantic lie, whereas for the atheist, it is an accurate representation of our actual position. We have not been convinced that any religious claims about any gods at all are true. This is your opportunity to back up your claims with some evidence or something, and instead, this jackass is just trying to hide from his rational responsibilities. This is a self-defense mechanism. This is him running and hiding. I hope that isn't a remote surprise, because it shouldn't be. Because this is why these people don't get anywhere, because they don't actually care about the truth. It's all just a scheme designed to get them back to emotional comfort, nothing more. That's why this guy is getting completely trashed. It's why I lack a belief in the non-existence of gods gets the religious absolutely nowhere. It destroys their entire reason for existing. It makes even trying to convert anyone completely irrelevant. It's really not that hard to understand where he's going wrong. Not that I suspect he cares or anything. These people don't tend to understand basic logic or reason. That's why they believe what they do. Because they're really, really dumb.
But like I say, this is real nuanced conversation.
No, it's not. It's you making a complete fool of yourself because you don't like being in the hot seat all the time, which you put yourself in by your own actions and beliefs. That's what this complaining is always about. But it's not fair. Yeah, life's a bitch. Get over it. Understanding how rational discourse works, because clearly the religious just don't, at least the ones who complain about this, that's kind of a basic part of maturation, isn't it? If you don't like it, stop making positive claims that you can't back up. Nobody's going to question you if you keep your mouth shut. Of course, there goes the Great Commission, right? You can't have it both ways. Either you make the claim and bear the responsibility for backing it up, or you keep it to yourself and you lose those conversions. Pick one. I don't really care which. You don't get to have it both ways, but sadly, these people don't understand the reality in which they live, and I'm wondering if a theist is ever going to come along and say something and completely misunderstand what's going on, and then I say, well, of course they are, because that's what they all do. I'm not going to get into any details just in case someone tries that in the comments, because I'm ready for you when you do, but I'll explain if somebody does. Because it's not going to work out for you either, any more than it did for this asshole.
If you are kind of into that thing like I am, just be aware of it, whether you're an atheist or whether you're a theist. And I think that by being aware of that, we can have better discourse and get farther in our conversations at arriving at truth.
But the fact that you made this video shows that you're not interested in the truth at all. Because if you cared about truth, you would be able to produce the evidence for why you believe what you believe, and you wouldn't believe it on the basis of faith or fifis. Showing how you rationally came to that conclusion should be easy. Any theist ought to be able to do it. It should be ludicrously simple if you actually had anything. You wouldn't need to jump through all these ludicrous hoops like he spent the last 7 minutes doing. But he doesn't have anything, does he? None of them do. If they did, they just present it. No dog and pony show, just evidence. Leave your faith and fifis at home. But they can't do that, so they just make a production out of showing why they're so ignorant in the first place. This guy doesn't understand. He just wants to believe. But he doesn't understand that his rational requirements obligate him to do more than just believe, to just feel good about shit in his head. It doesn't matter what you believe. It matters what you can prove, and he's got nothing. So instead, he tries to shift the burden of proof to the other side because he knows he's got nothing. If he did, he'd just present it. He doesn't have anything, though. He just wants to whine. He'd understand his own rational responsibilities and embrace them if he had anything. But he can't, because he doesn't. So he just runs around and makes a fool of himself. And that's not exactly a surprise, is it? It never is. They all do it, but some are a little more on the nose about it than others. Those people tend to show up on the channel making a complete fool of themselves and looking stupid. Well, here we go again. Enjoy the stupidity, because there doesn't seem to be any end to it in sight.